She didn't even look back. 1 second, Maline was laughing through the stress of wedding planning, and the next she was wiping tears with shaking hands, cake smeared across her arm, running out the door like someone had ripped the floor from under her. The room still felt frozen in the echo of that moment. Cake on Luke's face, shock on every guest, silence swallowing the space where a celebration was supposed to be. It wasn't a joke to her. It wasn't dramatic flair. It was a woman snapping after holding in far more than anyone realized. By the time she slammed the car door, her breath was breaking. She kept asking herself how everything flipped in seconds. How a couple that was supposed to be picking out flowers and figuring out seating charts ended up here. People around her whispered that she overreacted. Some asked why a cake toss mattered so much. But the cake wasn't the trigger. It was the final straw. The entire outburst wasn't about frosting. It was about the night before, the boundary she set, and the line Luke stepped over like it meant nothing. I'm certainly different, and if you've ever watched a moment and felt your chest tighten because you knew something deeper was playing out, you know exactly why this scene hits so hard. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where you stand. Are you Team Maline, or do you think she pushed too far? The truth is that Maline didn't see a joke. She saw proof. Proof that her fear had been right the entire time. Proof that Luke treated her boundary like a casual suggestion. People think arguments explode over big dramatic events, but the real damage happens in quiet moments, when someone you love tells you what hurts them, and you decide to ignore it. Her tears weren't only heartbreak. They were disappointment. They were realization. They were the memory of the bachelor party she tried to forget long enough to walk down the aisle. And this is where the night fractures. The moment Luke tries to wipe away the cake and pretend it's fixable, while Maline chokes on the one detail she can't let go. What she saw at that bachelor party changed everything, and she hasn't said the full truth yet. Hours before the blow-up, the day felt strangely heavy for Maline. She kept telling herself to hold it together, smile through the nerves, pretend the panic wasn't crawling up her chest every time she looked at Luke. She wanted a calm day. She wanted to believe they were solid, but the pressure sat on her shoulders like a weight she couldn't shake. Everything felt forced. Even the small moments between them had a stiffness she couldn't ignore, like they were both pretending the bachelor party never happened. She kept replaying his promise from weeks earlier. He said he wouldn't put himself in any situation that would make her feel unsafe. He said he understood her boundary. He said he respected it. But the words sounded thin now, soft. Easy to say in a quiet room. Harder to follow when lights and music changed the mood. She pushed her worry away again and again, telling herself not to ruin the day, telling herself she was being dramatic. She hated that she felt the need to manage her own fear so he wouldn't feel judged. Bankasy, on the other hand, walked into that surprise bachelor party with a split-second expression he hoped no one noticed. A tight smile, a quick look at the exit. He knew the setting was messy for him. His friends were hyped, ready to celebrate, and he didn't want to be the guy who killed the vibe. But he also remembered the boundary Maline set, the request that wasn't controlling or unreasonable. She wanted respect. She wanted honesty. She wanted him to walk away from anything that crossed the line. He told her he would. And in that moment, surrounded by loud music and cheering friends, he felt trapped between loyalty to them and loyalty to her. Shoreline Maline picked up on the shift long before anyone else. The way he avoided eye contact when she asked about the night, the pause he took before answering, the joke he cracked too quickly. She wanted to believe him, so she buried every red flag under hope. Hope that he meant what he said. Hope that he wouldn't betray the trust she gave him after their last rough patch. But hope alone cannot fix a crack that keeps widening. He kept insisting it was harmless, that nothing serious happened, that he tried to leave but couldn't. She tried to push that image out of her mind until one memory forced itself back. The moment the stripper walked toward him and he didn't move. That everything shifts, and Maline feels the truth finally catch up with her. The fallout didn't hit all at once. It came in slow waves, each one colder than the last. Luke kept repeating the same line, hoping the words would land differently if he said them enough times. Nothing happened. I didn't touch her. I wasn't even comfortable. But Maline had already seen the clip one of the guests recorded. She watched it alone, hands shaking because the truth was sitting right there in front of her. He wasn't trying to leave. He wasn't uncomfortable. He was smiling. Not a nervous smile, not an awkward wince. A smile that looked way too relaxed for a man who knew he was crossing a boundary she clearly set. That was the part that broke her. Not the dancer, not the music, not the setting. It was the expression on his face. It told her he made a choice. even if he tried to minimize it later. She felt like her feelings weren't important enough in the moment. When she saw him leaning back, letting the night play out, it hit her harder than any physical contact ever could, because betrayal isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's a person staying exactly where they promised they wouldn't be. Hyundai weren't about control. It wasn't about insecurity. She wasn't trying to cage him. It was about what? She needed to feel protected in a relationship that had already gone through too many shaky moments. She told him the bachelor party environment made her uncomfortable. She told him she didn't want him in situations that blurred lines. She didn't shout it. She didn't demand it. She spoke from the place inside her she rarely showed people, the place where her self-respect sits. Sometimes quiet, but never weak. And for her, honoring that boundary wasn't optional. It was part of how she defines love and safety. Luke didn't walk into the night intending to break her trust. His panic afterward wasn't fake. He knew the second he saw her face that he had slipped into a moment he couldn't rewind. He tried to defend himself because he wanted to believe it wasn't as serious as it looked. He wanted to believe his feelings for her should outweigh the evidence in the video. But regret hits differently when the damage is already done. He underestimated how that one choice would echo in her chest long after the music stopped. They felt blindsided in their own way. He felt misunderstood. She felt dismissed. He kept reaching for explanations. She kept shrinking away from them. Two people feeling the same pain, but for totally different reasons. He was grieving the fallout. She was grieving the moment she realized she wasn't fully heard. Luke finally drove over to the house, hoping a conversation would fix what the video broke. He rehearsed what he wanted to say at every red light. He imagined her opening the door, angry but still willing to talk. What he didn't imagine was the front yard. Paraded, his suitcase, his shirts, his cologne, his shoes, all thrown outside like the relationship had already been packed up and tossed out with them. Maline slid down the hallway wall the moment she shut the door. Her breath came out in broken pieces, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold everything together from the outside, because inside, she felt split open. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that makes every thought louder. She looked around and saw the empty spaces where his things used to sit, and that set her off all over again. She pulled her knees to her chest and let the tears fall, not caring how raw her face felt. She kept whispering the same question into her hands. How am I supposed to explain this to my family? How do you tell people who were ready to celebrate a wedding that the relationship didn't even make it to the aisle? It wasn't heartbreak alone. It was anger that he did the one thing she begged him not to do. It was disappointment that he convinced her she was safe when he knew her trust had already been shaken once. And under all of that was humiliation. She felt foolish for believing him, foolish for defending him, foolish for thinking she could push past her instincts when they had been warning her for weeks. Those emotions mixed in her chest until she couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. She reached for her phone more than once, thinking of calling a friend, but she stopped each time. She didn't want the pity in their voices, or the questions she wasn't ready to answer. She didn't want anyone to hear the truth she was struggling to admit even to herself. There was a fear sitting inside her that she never said out loud. A fear that if someone had to choose between her and temptation, she'd lose. A fear that she wasn't enough to keep someone loyal when boundaries were tested. She kept that fear buried for years. And tonight, it refused to stay quiet. Into herself on the living room floor, Luke was driving back with a knot tightening in his stomach. He replayed the same argument Maline made so many times. Respect what I'm asking. Don't put me in a position where I feel small. He thought she was being overly cautious. He thought the relationship was strong enough to handle one night of chaos. But as he turned onto her street, he felt the weight of every moment he brushed off. Every warning sign she tried to show him. Every chance he had to step away at the party, and didn't. Deadliest meant hit him forever. Not hit him first. Not fear. Embarrassment that the videos existed. Embarrassment that he looked comfortable in a situation he insisted he wanted no part of. He imagined her watching it. He imagined the look on her face. He gripped the steering wheel harder when he saw his belongings scattered across the lawn. Shirts on the grass, shoes on the steps, the cologne he gifted her lying sideways on the pavement. It was the strongest message she could send without saying a single word. He stepped out of the car slowly, the air feeling colder than before. He picked up one of the shirts and stared at it longer than he needed to, because the reality was sinking in. She wasn't reacting out of spite. She was reacting out of hurt he caused. hurt she warned him about, hurt he didn't take seriously until now. He walked up to the door and knocked. He waited, knocked again. No footsteps on the other side. No voice. No movement. Only silence pressing back at him. Inside the house, Maline heard every knock. She kept her hand over her mouth and refused to move. She wasn't ready to face him, and she wasn't sure she ever would be. Luke stood outside longer than he planned. He kept shifting the bouquet from one hand to the other, like he was hoping the flowers would rewrite the night. When Maline finally opened the door, she didn't open it wide. She left a narrow space between them, enough to show she was listening, but not enough to invite him in. He held the flowers out with a quiet hope, but she didn't lift her hands. She didn't even glance at them. The rejection wasn't loud. It was quiet and controlled, and that made it sharper. He tried to speak before she could close the door again. He rushed through the same explanation he told her earlier, telling her it meant nothing, telling her he didn't touch the dancer, telling her he didn't want to hurt her. She stared at the floor because she couldn't look at him without feeling the sting return. Her silence made him talk faster, as if filling the air would fix the truth sitting between them. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She let him say everything because she needed to hear how far he would go to protect his version of the night. Salmon kept looping back to the video, his shoulders low, his face relaxed, the soft smile he tried to hide when the music got louder. That tiny expression said more than anything he was saying now. She didn't care about the dancer. She cared that he had the chance to walk away and didn't, that it looked easy for him to stay in a moment that made her feel small. She felt like her boundary had been treated as a suggestion, and that humiliation twisted inside her every time he insisted it wasn't as bad as she thought. He wanted forgiveness because he didn't think one mistake should destroy them. She wanted honesty because she didn't recognize the man smiling in that video. They were fighting two different battles. He was trying to save the relationship. She was trying to save her dignity. Every time he reached toward her, she stepped back. Every time he softened his voice, her chest tightened more. She wasn't cold. She was overwhelmed. She wasn't ignoring him. She was protecting the part of herself that had been bruised one too many times. Always remember, the moment everything turns from loud emotion to quiet collapse. He kept saying, "I love you," like those words were enough to pull her back. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were tired, not angry. She looked at him like she was searching for something familiar and finding nothing. Her voice didn't shake when she finally spoke. She asked the one question he had no real answer for. "If you love me, why did you do it?" The question hung in the air longer than either of them expected. Luke opened his mouth like he was ready with an answer, but nothing came out. He tried to fall back on his earlier defense. He repeated that he didn't touch her, and kept his hands up the whole time. He said it with a confidence that might have sounded believable if Maline hadn't already watched the clip 5 times. She stepped closer, not to argue, but to steady herself. Her voice was flat when she said he was lying. She told him he didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look trapped. He looked fine. Too fine for a man who claimed he wanted nothing to do with what was happening. Pushed back. He said she was reading it wrong. He said he froze. He said he smiled because he didn't want to cause a scene. To him, intent mattered more than what ended up on camera. To her, the camera didn't care about intent. It showed exactly what she feared, exactly why she asked him to stay away from that environment. She kept repeating that the problem wasn't the dancer. The problem was that he stayed when he knew she'd feel disrespected. He kept saying the dancer barely touched him. She kept saying he didn't try to move. They weren't talking about the same thing anymore. The argument shifted without either of them noticing. It stopped being about the bachelor party and turned into every moment she felt unheard. Every time she tried to tell him her boundary mattered. Every time he brushed it off like she was being too sensitive. Luke stood there trying to convince her it wasn't serious. Maline stood there trying not to break from how serious it felt to her. Two people in the same relationship, but experiencing it like they lived in different rooms. There was a gray area that neither wanted to admit. For Luke, betrayal meant doing something physical. For Maline, betrayal meant ignoring the emotional safety she asked for. She didn't want perfection. She wanted respect. She didn't want control. She wanted consideration. She didn't want him to avoid fun. She wanted him to avoid situations that made her feel replaceable. And the worst part was knowing they never agreed on what the line even was. The longer they talked, the clearer the gap became. He focused on actions. She focused on intentions. He insisted the night didn't mean anything. She felt the night revealed everything. He tried to reassure her by saying she mattered. She felt the reassurance collapse the moment she remembered the smile on his face as the dancer leaned in. Something inside her felt beyond repair. Not because he couldn't be forgiven, but because he didn't understand why she hurt this deeply. He reached out to touch her arm. She stepped back. He tried to apologize again. She shook her head. His voice cracked when he asked her not to throw away what they built. She looked down to hide the tears forming again. She wasn't angry anymore. That was the part that scared him. The anger softened into something heavier, something final. When she lifted her eyes, there was nothing left to argue about. No more explanations to dissect. No more excuses to untangle. She took one slow breath and said the sentence he wasn't prepared to hear. "I know you lost me." The house felt heavier once the yelling stopped. No more sharp edges in their voices. No more frantic explanations. No more back and forth that left both of them gasping for something solid to hold. Maline lay curled on the far side of the bed, her back to the door, her face buried in a pillow that was already damp. The room was dark, except for a small lamp she forgot to turn off. Her breathing kept breaking in those short, uneven pulls that happen when someone's body is trying to calm down faster than their mind can. She wasn't second-guessing herself. She wasn't wavering. She was grieving. And grief, especially the kind caused by someone you love, doesn't fade the moment a decision is made. Luke stood near the dresser, unsure of what to do with his hands or his presence. He wanted to sit beside her, but every step he took closer made her shoulders tense. He didn't understand that part. He thought being physically near her would show support. To him, it felt comforting. To her, it felt suffocating. He kept whispering apologies, not realizing that the repetition made them feel smaller each time. They weren't wrong or insincere. They were simply too late. They were built on the version of the story he believed, not the one she lived. He apologized for hurting her. She needed him to understand why she felt hurt in the first place. Sam and some apologies land because the other person finally sees you. Some fall flat because they confirm that they still don't. Luke's apology was the second kind. He meant every word. His voice shook. His shoulders dropped. His hands trembled at the edge of the blanket. But every sentence circled back to what he didn't intend, what he didn't feel, what he didn't think was happening. He spoke from logic. She needed him to speak from recognition. He kept saying he didn't cross the line. She kept crying because he didn't understand that the line was emotional, not physical. IMD watching this moment unfold as Sabrina from TLC Drama Live, it's impossible not to feel the weight of two people trying and failing to meet each other in the middle. You can almost see it in the way she pulls the blanket higher. She isn't trying to punish him. She's trying to protect whatever is left of her self-worth. And you can see it in the way he lingers at the edge of the bed, desperate for a signal she isn't ready to give. Every couple reaches a moment where love and pain start running side by side, impossible to untangle. This was theirs. Her silence wasn't cold. It was the exhaustion that hits after too many chances. His desperation wasn't manipulative. It was the panic of someone realizing the moment he thought he'd never face has finally arrived. For a second, when she stopped crying, he almost believed she was softening. Her shoulders dropped. Her breathing steadied. She turned her face slightly toward the wall instead of pressing it deeper into the pillow. But the calm wasn't surrender. It was resignation. That quiet space where you accept something because fighting it hurts too much. Armstrong, there's a part of you watching this thinking about the history they have, everything they've been through, every time they split and found their way back. Couples with a pattern like theirs don't fall apart once. They fall apart in cycles. They break, they repair, they believe, they repeat. And the question hanging in the air wasn't whether they were ending tonight. It was whether this ending would be the last, or another chapter in a pattern they haven't learned how to stop. Timber finally sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, whispering one more apology. She didn't move. She didn't respond. She didn't reach for him. She didn't push him away either. The quiet felt dangerous, the kind of quiet where anything could happen next. And this is where the outside world started to buzz. Screenshots, comments, speculation, people claiming they knew what happened after this night. People claiming they knew where Luke went next. People insisting they had proof the story wasn't over. Because hours after this scene aired, a rumor started spreading online that flipped everything on its head. The rumors started before the episode even finished airing. A few viewers swore they had inside information. One claimed Maline and Luke secretly married later. saying a distant cousin saw photos that no one else ever saw. Another insisted Luke was spotted in LA, alone, walking into a restaurant with someone who definitely was not Maline. Both stories spread fast, even though neither had proof. Then there was the wild rumor about Jasmine being deported, which had nothing to do with this couple but still got pulled into the conversation, showing how quickly the fan space gets chaotic when emotions run high. Simmons weren't reacting to the facts. They were reacting to how the storyline made them feel. Viewers who believed in second chances projected hope onto Maline and Luke. They wanted to think a breakup this emotional might end in reconciliation. Others who had been through similar heartbreak projected their own endings and insisted the relationship was finished. Some even rewrote parts of the episode in their minds, focusing on details that matched their own experiences, rather than what was shown. Recent reality TV sparks debates like this. Fans see pieces of themselves in these couples, their fears, their insecurities, their patterns, their regrets. It becomes less about what Maline and Luke went through and more about what the viewer lived through. That's why the theories grow so fast. Every rumor becomes a mirror of someone else's story. For Maline, all that noise online didn't change the quiet storm she was sitting in. She didn't care about strangers predicting her future. She didn't care who claimed they saw Luke in another city. She didn't care about the odd rumor that floated in from a completely different storyline. She cared about the decision waiting in front of her, a choice she had avoided making for years, a choice that scared her more than losing him ever did. She sat alone on the couch the morning after, scrolling through messages she wasn't ready to answer, feeling the weight of every possible outcome pressing on her chest. Her eyes were tired, and her hair was still pulled back from crying the night before. She kept replaying the same question in her mind, not the one she asked Luke, the one she had to ask herself. Because Maline needs to decide whether this breakup is the end or the moment she finally walks away for good. The morning light made everything look harsher. The clothes she threw out, the wilted flowers on the table, the bruise under her eyes from crying until her body gave up. But for the first time in hours, Maline wasn't shaking. Her chest still hurt, but the panic had softened into something steadier. Her clarity didn't come as a grand epiphany. It came quietly, the way truth often does. She realized this wasn't about one night, or one dancer, or one mistake. It was about every moment she spoke up and felt dismissed. Every time she tried to draw a line and he stepped over it. Not because he didn't love her, but because he didn't take her fears as seriously as his own comfort. Nationality wasn't the issue. She never doubted his feelings. That was part of what made this harder. Two people can care for each other deeply and still fail to protect the space between them. She sat with that thought for a long time, letting it settle instead of fighting it. She wasn't ending a relationship because she stopped loving him. She was ending it because she started loving herself in a way she hadn't before. Luke sat outside in his car, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house he once imagined building a life in. He finally understood what she meant when she said boundaries matter. He thought love was enough to cover the small missteps. He thought intent mattered more than impact. He thought showing up after the fact proved something. But now he saw the pattern she had been trying to show him for years. She didn't break because of the party. She broke because the party was the final reminder that she couldn't trust him to protect the parts of her that felt fragile. He leaned back in the seat and took a slow breath. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about what he lost. He was thinking about what she deserved. And he knew she deserved to feel safe with the person she chose. He knew she deserved someone who heard her the first time, not the 10th. Someone who understood that respect isn't shown in the quiet promises, but in the choices made when no one is watching. Watching this unfold as Sabrina from TLC Drama Live, it's clear that some breakups don't happen because the love fades. They happen because the effort bends, and bends, until it finally snaps. People often assume a relationship ends when the feelings disappear, but sometimes the feelings stay strong while the trust drains away little by little. Maline walked back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. She took a deep breath and let herself think without fear for the first time. She didn't feel weak. She didn't feel confused. She felt steady. She knew that staying would teach her to shrink. Leaving would teach her to heal, and even though it broke her heart to picture life without him, she also knew that every time she stayed through pain, she taught herself to accept less than she asked for. Homeland finally stepped out of the car and walked to the porch. He didn't knock this time. He set the flowers down gently, not as a plea, but as a goodbye. He whispered something Maline didn't hear through the door, a quiet acceptance that this time the decision wasn't his to make. Some relationships collapse not from one blow, but from 1,000 ignored moments. Some endings aren't failures, they're self-preservation. And as the weight of the night sank into silence, both of them understood something neither wanted to admit. This breakup wasn't cruelty, it was accountability. And for Maline, walking away wasn't revenge. It was the first real step toward choosing herself. It is strange how years of effort can collapse in a single moment. One night, one boundary crossed, one smile caught on camera that shouldn't have been there. It didn't matter how many memories they built, or how many times they tried to rebuild after a fight. It took only a few seconds for everything to shift from repairable to final. And as painful as that sounds, it happens to couples far outside reality TV. Trust is fragile. It doesn't crack loudly. It cracks quietly, then shatters when you least expect it. Watching Maline that morning, sitting with swollen eyes and a steady breath, it became clear she wasn't falling apart anymore. She was absorbing the truth she avoided for too long. Boundaries aren't rules. They are the lines we draw to keep our emotional well-being intact. When someone crosses them and we stay silent, we don't protect the relationship. We slowly erode ourselves. She held on for years. She gave second chances. She explained her fears more times than she wanted to admit. But no matter how much she tried to meet him halfway, the weight always seemed to fall harder on her. Blaine didn't set out to break her trust. That much is evident. His regret was real, and his fear of losing her came from a place of love. But regret after the fact doesn't rebuild the foundation that was already unstable. Viewers forget that mistakes in relationships don't always come from malice. Sometimes they come from blind spots, from habits, from not understanding your partner's wounds until you've stepped right on them. Luke learned that lesson too late, and part of him knew this heartbreak wasn't punishment. It was the cost of not listening closely enough. Before anyone watching, this story has a sharp lesson tucked between the chaos. Love is important, but love without respect slips fast. Boundaries without follow-through are empty. Forgiveness without change becomes exhausting. And second chances are only meaningful when both people grow from the first mistake. The question is whether this breakup becomes that turning point for them, or whether it becomes another entry in a pattern that already trapped them for years. Maybe room to believe both. Maybe walking away forces Luke to understand her pain deeper than he ever did when they were together. Maybe distance shows Maline how strong she is when she stops trying to fix everything alone. But there is also the possibility that their history pulls them back into each other's orbit. Patterns are hard to break when love still lingers, even if the trust doesn't. The last image we see is Maline closing her eyes and letting out a breath that sounds different from everyone before it. It isn't panic. It isn't despair. It's the quiet acceptance that sometimes the hardest choice is the one that saves you. And somewhere else, Luke sits alone with the weight of a lesson that cost him the person he wanted to marry. Whether that pushes them toward healing or toward another cycle is something neither of them knows yet. You'll see why this moment matters even more when you look at how another couple faces their own boundary crisis in the next story. Their situation might be different, but the emotional fallout hits just as hard and raises even bigger questions about loyalty, trust, and what it takes to rebuild a relationship when the foundation starts to crack.